Imagine for a moment that BMW didn't stop development of the E30 M3 with the Sport Evo. Imagine the M division went one step further, put some more of the DTM car into the road car, and created an E30 M3 CSL. Well, 30 years later, this is one company's vision of what that CSL might have been like. Redux is a British company, and the plan is to build just 30 of these enhanced and evolved M3s. And yes, it is a real M3 underneath, not a 318 with delusions of grandeur. At first glance, it might be hard to see where the 4,000 hours of work have gone, but I think that subtlety is part of the appeal. Essentially, all the body panels bar the doors and roof are replaced with carbon fibre ones, and you can have the doors and roof in carbon too, if you want. The box arches have been widened by 40mm at the front and 50mm at the rear, while there is also a more pronounced chin and deeper side skirts. But it all looks very natural, very factory. Under the bonnet, the naturally aspirated inline 4-cylinder has been expanded to 2.5 litres, like those last Sport Evos, and it's been given Gen V individual throttle bodies, a BMW Motorsport crank, a carbon airbox, a custom billet aluminium valve cover, and a Motec ECU, amongst other things. If you want, Redux will do you a full aluminium block as well. Brakes are by AP Racing with big 6-piston calipers clamping 362mm discs at the front. Carbon ceramics are an option, more for the savings in unsprung mass than any extra requirement to stop a car that weighs just 1,150 kilos. Those are some of the big headline alterations, but there have been lots of little tweaks too. There are so many exquisite details on this car, so I thought I'd pick out, well, just half a dozen and sort of examples, starting with the headlights down here, the new Hella bi-xenon headlights, obviously smaller than the original, so they're set into this billet aluminium ring around here, which I think is really cool. It's beautiful for a start, and when they're on, they look like the sort of the normal full-size headlights, but there's also an element of the sort of the E39 M5, you know, the ring headlights on that, so yeah, really cool. Wheels next. So these are an 18-inch wheel, and you think, well, is that a bit big really for an E30 M3? But on the 2.5 Sport Evo, the arches were increased by 10mm on that in order to accommodate the 18-inch wheels for the DTM cars. So the Sport Evo ran 16-inch rims, but the DTM cars ran 18-inch. These are 18-inch rims, and they're a rather lovely sort of flat version of the BBS alloys that were on the DTM car. Moving down here, wing mirrors. You might think, are these sort of shrunken down E36 wing mirrors? But no, these are off the last of the line DTM cars, so Steve Soper, 1992, and these are actually carbon copies of those. So very rare, and they fit perfectly. Carbon copy, they are carbon, obviously. Door handles and 3 little dots. The more you look around this car, and point out some of the others perhaps as well, you'll notice there's a theme of 3 and 30 all over the car. I think it's just very subtle, but really nice. And then down at the rear, this rear deck lid, carbon, of course, like so much of the else of the car. But it's this bit here that I want to focus on, because if you look at an original E30, it just kind of doesn't look quite right here. The gaps are all a bit weird around here, it hugs a bit there, and then it sort of tapers off and just looks a bit messy, really. So they've cleaned it all up. It now looks much neater, like it should have been. What's number 6? Well, I've got to get down on my hands and knees for this. It is worth it though. Oh, look at that. A lovely bespoke billet aluminium diff cover. Beautiful. Let's have a look inside. Warmer in here than it is outside today. I think in here it matches the exterior in terms of it all looks quite standard, except the materials are different, and you can kind of tell it on, particularly on a day like today, the different temperatures of the material. So you've got obviously the sort of the standard plastics here, but then you've got the lovely warmth of the Alcantara here. There's the leather down here. In fact, on the seats you can see the little Redux logo there with the perforations in it, 30 of them. Oh, and talking of which, the 3 dots there to match the ones on the exterior door handles as well. And then you'll go for the stalk here, and just the temperature is so cool and cold, and you know that it's billet aluminium, and then you realise that this down here is billet as well. And then the sort of the completely different texture of the gear knob, which is not from a Mark 1 Golf, it's a BMW Motorsport gear lever, and of course the wonderful dogleg Getrag gearbox. Talking of which, let's go for a drive. What a glorious sound. It's now putting out 300 brake horsepower in this, as opposed to 238 in the original 2.5 litre Sport Evo. Torque's also up, 205 pounds-foot in this car as opposed to 177 in the original. Love down low, you get that really gruff growl to it. And it just builds and builds and builds. So we're up to 8,000 RPM. The 5-speed dogleg Getrag gearbox has been retained, but with a quick shift assembly, and there is a lightweight flywheel and single plate clutch as well. Perhaps just as importantly, this has got shorter gear ratios, so you can actually use all of those revs more often, and this BMW Motorsport gear knob feels really good as well. It just feels that much more sort of solid than the slightly vague original. And what about the handling? Because there's always a big question with these cars. You think, how much will it have changed? How much of the character of the original will have been, well, not lost exactly, but sort of hidden in a new car like this? When you've got so much that's different, you know, you've got new aluminium hub carriers, new anti-roll bars, obviously we've got Group A Bilstein suspension on this, you can have XTC dampers if you want. But the lovely thing is, as soon as you turn into the first corner, you know it's still an E30 M3. What do I mean by that? You still have to think about the front. It's still that slightly slow, certainly around the straight ahead sort of reaction from the steering, this sort of biggish steering wheel. That first little bit of lock that you put on is so distinctive because it's almost quite slow, almost sort of unreactive, and then you get more into it, and in this it really bites. And you really think about the front end in this. Obviously, because we've got more power, you can drive it more on the throttle. There is a gripper limited slip diff between the rear wheels, which gives you a nice sense of control over the limit. You can do the big, lurid showboat skids if you bully the throttle and are prepared for the steering to get pretty heavy when you've got lots of lock on, but that's not where this car feels happiest. The magic happens at smaller angles of slip, just like in the original. That's where you can tease the tread blocks, make it float and play with it all the way into and out of a bend. This car, number 2 of the 30, has a road setup, and there is still a fair bit of roll in it, which I like. There is an option to fit Cup 2s and have it more track focused, but given the temperature at Bedford Autodrome at this time of year, I'm quite glad that we were on the standard Pilot Sport 4s. You can sort of tackle it in all sorts of ways, on the brakes, get a bit of oversteer that way, or on the throttle with this, then just really run it out to the curves like that. It's just, there's so much to do, there's so many options with this. You can even drive it so you feel sort of the front inside wheel hanging in the air. Having an up-the-nose COVID test is understandable but eye-watering, and the same goes for the price of resto mods. Redux's reimagining of an M3 will set you back £330,000 plus the cost of the donor car. Worth it? Well, I certainly admire the obsessive attention to detail that has gone into it, and you can tell that it's been created with a deep knowledge of and respect for the original. I also think this is what most people imagine an E30 M3 would be like to drive. I love the standard original, but I think people picture it being something closer to Schneier's on the Isle of Man or Winkelhock at Hockenheim. This has the power to make those dreams come true. Thank you very much indeed for watching that. I hope you enjoyed it. You know what I'm going to say at this part of the film, so we'll get to that in a minute. But what did you think of it? Do you like it? What sort of resto mod would you like to see next? I quite fancy seeing a resto mod of a cheaper E30, maybe a 318 IS or something like that, something a bit more affordable. But yes, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel. If you have subscribed to the channel, please make sure that all the notifications are turned on, not just the little bell, but all the other ones in settings and stuff, because, well, yeah, it really helps us and it's much appreciated. So there we go. See you next time.